Good morning. Thank you so much for coming today. I felt so sad that we have such a dreary day today. We've had such a lovely spring or fall, and then all of a sudden the temperature just dropped 20 degrees, and it's cloudy. Anyway, what are you going to do? We've had a really beautiful fall, so we can't complain too much. Hope you enjoyed that song. First time I'd ever heard it when I found it the other day, and very interesting song, really ties into the theme of the message today, which is marriage bigger than itself. And as you know, we've been on a series for a while now, and we've been talking about our vision statement at the back of the room. And right now we're talking about number 5, which is we are building God-centered marriages and families that are the dwelling place of God and the cornerstone of a healthy society. I think that for all of us, we know that in the past, in history, marriage is typically considered to be important, kind of like almost culturally expected. And many studies have been done over the years that point to the importance of strong families to create a healthy and vibrant and growing society. And at the same time, many studies have shown that when families break down, when there's problems in the family, when there's dysfunction in the family, society suffers. Maybe not like right away, but over time, things break down. You can't have broken families and a wholesome society. They don't work together. At some point, they're going to correlate with each other. And as we all know, in today's society, family, the importance of family, the significance of family, the focus of family and marriage has changed a lot. It's changed a lot even in the short number of years that I've been alive. Divorce and family breakdown has become much more common, almost expected. It's almost normal now in society. And also marriage is often seen as optional or kind of irrelevant or something of the past that we don't, if you want it, that's fine, but you don't need it, it's not really that important. There's that kind of an attitude around marriage and family today. And I think that there's good reasons for that. It's natural that if a person grows up in a broken home or a dysfunctional home, you think, well, I don't need that. Why do I want to subject that to my children? When we experience pain or suffering in a situation, then we don't want to recreate that. But I think it's also really a shame. Because even though sometimes things don't work out and we can't change that. But for those of us who had, good experiences in our family or, have kids or happily married, even though we know how challenging it can be at times, we also recognize how much beauty, how much joy, how much fulfillment can come from that, especially over the course of your life, even if things are difficult in the moment. But it's a very special experience that you can't just read of in a book or replicate in some other way. And how much, if you didn't have those people in your life, you couldn't even imagine what your life would be like. I have this experience sometimes where, day to day, our house is very full of people all the time. And we have 4 kids. And sometimes it can get a little crazy, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, my life would be so much quieter or more peaceful or so much easier to organize or simpler if I didn't have kids. But then sometimes Adonia and the kids will go on a trip to Missouri, or maybe I'll be on a trip somewhere for church work or something like that, and I'll be by myself. Or especially if I'm at home and my family leaves and the house is empty, I'm like, this is terrible. I feel like I don't even know myself. Like, who am I without my family? It's weird. Like, as a young single person, that's your life, right? But once you have a family and you're with those people all the time, that becomes your identity. That becomes who you are, more than just an individual person. And there's something really beautiful about that, where you can't actually distinguish who you are outside of your family, outside of your couple, or outside of you and your kids, or you and your parents. I think there's something there that God really intended to be a part of everybody's life and everybody's experience. Even though realistically, we look at our own situations, our own families, our world, it's not like that many times. But I think we get a glimpse of what God intended for us to experience from birth to death. From cradle to grave, that kind of safety, comfort, love, all these things that we experience in a healthy family dynamic. I think that we too easily write off our families because of our bad experiences or because of societal norms or pressure. We don't understand how big marriage is. We don't understand how big family is. And how important it is, not just for myself and my happiness and my fulfillment, but to God. This is a quote from Reverend Moon. He talks a lot about family. He says, "Marriage is more than a simple coming together of a man and woman. It is a precious ceremony of commitment to carry on God's work of creation. Marriage is the path by which a man and a woman become one, create new life, and establish true love. Through marriage, a new future is created, societies are formed, nations are built. God's world of peace is realized with married families at the center. It is in the family that God's kingdom of heaven is brought about. So husbands and wives must be centers of peace. Not only must there be love between the husband and wife, but the couple must also be able to bring harmony to their extended family. It is not enough that the husband and wife live well together in love. All the relatives must love each other as well." So the point is that, marriage is much more than just two people getting together, being happy together. The purpose is greater. The purpose is far-reaching. That relationship has impacts that will last for generations, hundreds of years into the future, as we know very well from the Bible. From the story of Adam and Eve. We are still dealing with the consequences of that situation, however many, 6,000 biblical years it was ago, or how many real years it was, we're still dealing with it today. So, we have to think more deeply about, our purpose behind getting married, our purpose behind getting blessed, purpose behind having a family. It's more than just physical attraction. There's a study that was done, actually over 100 years ago, by this man named A.E. Winship. And here we go. I have an excerpt from the study. But basically, he was working in the jail system, and he was meeting with many, many different people. And he discovered, kind of accidentally, that many of these people were related to each other. Even many of them had different last names and things like that. But he found that many of them were related to each other. And so he actually decided to do a study. And he looked at, I think, 5 generations of back and found that many of these people had the same common ancestor. His name was Jukes. Max Jukes. Yeah. It's a pretty well-known study. And so he actually, he conducted this study, wrote a short book about it. And he compared this man and his descendants with another well-known man at the time whose name was Jonathan Edwards. And so I'm just going to kind of read here some of the conclusions and summary of what he came to discover. Oh, I'm sorry. There's another quote I meant to read, so forgive me, I'll go back and read that quote. "Marriage is not a simple matter of a man and a woman of marriageable age coming together and combining their two lives. Marriage is something built on the basis of sacrifice. The man must live for the sake of the woman, and the woman for the sake of the man. As you continue to live for the sake of your spouse, your selfish mind disappears completely. The heart that seeks to sacrifice this way is the heart of love. Love is not a man and woman meeting each other and having a good time. Love is offering up your life. If you marry, you must do so on the basis of your determination that your life is for your spouse. Okay. And so this study summarizes that A.E. Winship, the guy who did the study, compared the descendants of the two men and presented the results of his research in a book entitled Jukes Edwards, A Study in Education and Heredity. And so Jukes was kind of an ordinary guy, but basically he was mostly a drunk his whole life. His whole life was just like really, he didn't care about the consequences of his actions. Jonathan Edwards was a really well-known minister at the time, and very, very well-respected, well-loved person. So just to give a little background. So he said, as for Jonathan Edwards' descendants, they included a U.S. vice president, 3 senators, 3 governors, 3 mayors, 13 college presidents, 30 judges, 65 professors, 80 public office holders, 100 lawyers, 62 physicians, 75 Army or Navy officers, and 100 clergymen, missionaries, and theological professors. There were practically no lawbreakers. On the other hand, Max Jukes' descendants included 7 murderers, 60 thieves, 128 prostitutes, 140 other convicts, 280 indigents, and 440 who were physically wrecked by addiction to alcohol. Out of the 1,200 descendants studied, 300 died prematurely. So obviously, it's a little bit of an extreme circumstances, right? You're going to take any two people and study their descendants. It's probably not going to be quite that extreme. But it does show that when you look at life and your lineage and your descendants over the course of time, it's not like your life makes no difference. It's not like the actions and your attitude you have in your life and how you live your life and how you treat your spouse and how you treat your kids doesn't have any long-term effects. It does. And I think we like to think, conveniently that it doesn't. It's like a rationalization for our actions and our mindset. But the reality is, if we look at history, if we look at like studies like this, then the things that we do today are going to have long-lasting impacts, going to have long-lasting effects. Maybe it will become more clear and more obvious even once we are passed away, but it will be there. And you can see even just one guy, one couple, he had 11 kids, so that's, Jonathan Edwards had 11 kids, so more descendants, obviously, multiplied faster. But, how many good people, it sounds like they were good people, came from that. And one comment that they made about the other guy, he had so many people in jail, right? They said that the state of, Massachusetts or whatever, had to pay like 1.2 million people, $1 million for the care of all the inmates and stuff, which in 1800 money is probably like $30 million or something. I have no idea what that would equal. So, marriage is really so much more significant than just two people getting into a relationship and loving each other. Marriage is about two becoming one and creating a lasting legacy. God created us in such a way that we only truly reflect God's nature and character as a couple. I think that traditionally, because the Bible talks about how God made Adam, and then God took the rib out of Adam and then made it to form Eve, that we think that women are like an afterthought, or like, God was like, well, I don't want the guy to be lonely, so maybe I'll make a partner for him. That's kind of what it says in the Bible, right? So I think that many times, culturally or whatever, we've used that as an excuse to kind of make men and women not equal or something like that. I'm glad that attitude is changing. But even though the Bible says that, I think that it's not believable, really, because God made all of creation in pairs. male, female. And then we think, oh, when God made human beings, which were like the culmination of God's creation, he was like, I don't know, maybe just male, It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that's just food for thought, something I thought was interesting. But this is a really hard topic to talk about. It's a very hard topic for us as pastors because this is probably some of the most difficult things we deal with is supporting marriages, supporting families. We had a conversation about this a while back, and we said, what is the core of our ministry? What is the core of our church? What should we be focusing on? Because we do many, many things, right? We've got our church activities, we've got outreach, we've got Sunday school, we've got food bank, we've got many, many different things that are happening on a regular basis, plus national and international events. But if we took all those things away and we had to focus on maybe just one thing, what would be the important thing? What would be the thing that would allow our community to thrive and to grow? And we talked about it for a while, and we decided it's families. It's marriages. If we can help those to be successful, then that's going to be the key to ensuring our future. Which is why I'm so grateful that, for example, we just finished the marriage course. I want to give Gilo and Casio a big hand for making that happen. We had 3 couples that joined the marriage course, and it's, not a huge number of people, but just like you saw in the study that they did, how much impact that could have in the future to those families, to those children, to the relatives of those children, to all the people that family touches. That's very meaningful, actually. So I'm really grateful that we are able to offer that every year. But yeah, it's hard. It's not easy to deal with marital challenges. We all know that we all come from families that are in one way or another broken. And we don't always have the tools to be successful in making a relationship work long term. So we need to encourage each other. We need to be strong. We need to be hopeful. We need to get help, and definitely trying to get into a relationship where there's, there was love at one point, but there's so much resentment and anger now, and many times children are dealing with the effects of it. It's really, really hard, but it's the work that is really important to do. I think that many people don't want to touch it because it's so painful and it's so hard, and many times you can only do so much. But we also can't turn a blind eye to those things either and act like they don't exist or act like there's nothing we can do, because it often is something that we can do. So in our life, we often have many different things that we focus on, right? We have our hobbies, we have our projects, we have things that we feel God put a calling onto on our hearts. We have our careers, we have to make money. But family is the greatest key to our happiness and fulfillment in life and long-term success. That's something that we can't change about ourselves. That's something that we know that no matter how successful I may be in other areas of my life, if I can't create happy relationships, then those things will not be fulfilling to me. And we know this when we look at some of the most influential and powerful people in the world, people like Bill Gates, who recently, him and his wife divorced. And I was talking with someone who used to work in that area, and I was like, they seem like such a nice couple, they seem really successful. And he was like, well, actually, it's been well known for a long time that he was kind of a womanizer. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So, it's like you try to look up to people, especially if they're successful, they have a nice family. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I was Arnold Schwarzenegger's biggest fan. Not really, but I really like the guy. Terminator 2 was one of the defining movies of my childhood. It's funny, you watch those movies as an adult and you're like, yeah, the acting is quite bad in this movie. But, as a kid, it's like it's a defining movie. It was very powerful to me. I liked it so much. And I really liked Arnold Schwarzenegger, mostly because of that, and it's kind of shallow. But, I was really sad and heartbroken when, he, admitted that he had an affair with his maid and had a child out of that. And, I think because of that, him and his wife divorced. It's not that to say that he's not that the things that he accomplished in his life are not meaningful, but, that's sad. That's sad. And, of course, maybe many of you know Jeff Bezos, who's the founder of Amazon, and, he had an affair on his wife as well. And, the guy's worth like $200 billion, he should have everything. But it's not enough. It's not enough. That the family, you can't give up your family for wealth, fame, money. You can do those things with your family, but you should never be the second priority. All right. So family should never be our second priority, whether it's in our individual situations or in our church. Often we have a focus, right? A thing that we've been asked to do or a thing we feel called to do as a church. And we tend to focus on that one thing. I was talking with Reverend Dew and Mrs. Dew about this yesterday. And we're like, okay, everything else is less important, We got to focus on that one thing, whether it's, ACLC outreach or tribal messiahship or whatever. And we've become very bad at, balancing priorities. We tend to focus on, put all our resources in one thing and then make the other things not so important. Well, if you want to work on that, that's fine, but we're going to do the important thing. And so I think that one area that we really need to work on, and I hope that we have, but will continue to in the future, is really balancing priorities. Not to say that those things aren't important, but to also prioritize our families and our well-being of our community as well. When we look at the Bible, actually, as Pastor Donia was sharing last week, there's not a lot of verses in the Bible that talk about family. But if you read between the lines, especially in the Old Testament, there's a lot about families. Actually, everything's about family in the Old Testament especially. In the New Testament, especially I believe because Jesus was single, there was really a focus on being single and being celibate. Even there's a verse that says, it's better to not marry if you want to be a religious person. But in the Old Testament, everything was about family restoration. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. Noah's family. In the story of Noah, Noah did all this. He was so faithful to God. He built the ark on the mountain and everything. And then at the end of the story, Ham, gets upset at his dad, gets judgmental towards his father because he's laying naked after drinking a bunch of wine or something like that. And he gets his brothers all riled up, and they face backwards in shame, and they cover him with a blanket. Basically oh, I'm just so disgusted. What a terrible, garbage person, Even though he had shown so much faith to God and to his family. Their family wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for him. But then after Noah woke up, he cursed him. He cursed Ham and cursed Ham's descendants. And, why is that a big deal? Because God was trying to restore the original family. God was trying to restore the original. Obviously, it gets much more, we have to study the principle to understand all these stories and why they're important, because otherwise they just seem like a bunch of random stories. But they all have meaning. They all have sequential meaning. And so that was a big deal for God. That was a big deal for Noah. So these family issues are a long-term investment. We do a lot of things that give us short-term joy or short-term gains. There's nothing more long-term that we can invest into than our families. The legacy that we leave with our families, with our children, with our relatives will impact for many, many, many hundreds of years to come. So no matter how bad the situation is, and I know that some of the situations are very difficult and they feel kind of hopeless. And it's hard to find the balance because we don't want to just throw out the ideal. We don't want to judge people because, your family's got problems, But we want to have compassion because we all have challenges. But we also don't want to let go of that ideal that we're striving for, even if we get some barriers in the way, even if we hit some challenges or some hurdles in the way. We want to continue to strive for those things. God gave us the ability and the destiny to be co-creators and recreators of our lives, to build a new legacy, just like the video was talking about. So can never forget that. We always have a choice. We can always go in a new direction, even if things seem really difficult. We can't give up. It's so important. So I want to finish with a couple last quotes from our founder, Reverend Moon. He said, "We marry not for ourselves, but for the sake of our partners. When looking for a spouse, it is wrong to look only for a beautiful person or for a person living well. Human beings must live for the sake of each other. We should apply this principle to marriage too. No matter how uneducated or homely your prospective spouse may be, you should marry with a heart that you will love him or her even more than if the spouse were educated and beautiful. God's love is the most precious of all blessings. In marriage, we receive that blessing of love and put it into practice in our own lives. We must understand this precious meaning of marriage, conduct our lives in marriage in the context of true love, and bring about true families. From this perspective, world peace is not such a huge undertaking. It starts with peaceful families that create peaceful societies and eliminate conflict among countries. This will lead to world peace." This example shows the importance of families that are intact, and the immense responsibility such families must bear. The thinking that says it's enough that I live well and that my family lives well is completely alien to me. Marriage is not something that involves just the bride and groom. Marriage creates a relationship between two families, and it brings reconciliation between clans and countries. Each accepts the other's different culture and overcomes the resentment and hatred built up through history. When a Korean and Japanese marry, it contributes to reconciliation between the two countries. When a white person and a black person marry, it contributes to reconciliation between the two races. The children of each marriage represent harmony because they inherit the lineage of two races. They represent a new beginning for humanity that transcends the races. When this continues for a few generations, division and hostility among nations, races, and religions will disappear, and humankind will become one family living in a world of peace. Please join me in prayer. Good morning, our most beloved Heavenly Parent. We thank you so much for this day. Thank you for everybody that came here this morning, that we could sing together and pray together and hear this message. I pray, Heavenly Parent, that we can see our lives the way you see them, as meaningful, as important, as a doorway to the future of what this world will look like. And many times, Heavenly Parent, we get stuck in our current circumstances. It's hard to see beyond the emotions and the challenges of our day-to-day, of our everyday life, Heavenly Parent. We invite you to be in our lives. We invite your presence and your guidance into our families, Heavenly Parent. We know that sometimes it's hard for us to find the way forward, but we know that you believe in us, that you know us, you know our challenges, and you know what way forward there is for us, Heavenly Parent. And please help us to recognize that just as we are a product of history, just as we are a product of the good and the bad decisions that people have made and the good and the bad foundations that people have laid for us, we are also laying a foundation today. And no, things aren't the way we would like them to be as much. And maybe things are really far away from what we thought that they would be today, Heavenly Parent. But I just pray that we don't lose hope, that we can continue to encourage one another, that we can continue to support one another, that we can recognize the hope that you have for our families, even if they don't become fully realized for many years or generations to come, Heavenly Parent, that we can have the heart to invest for the future, that we can have the heart to lay the seeds for goodness in our families for years to come, even if we didn't have that for ourselves, Heavenly Parent, to make a change to starting today, Heavenly Parent. We're so grateful for you always believing in us and never giving up on us, and for this opportunity that we can be here. We just really want your guidance and your presence in our lives, Heavenly Parent, in this community. And despite what mistakes and shortcomings we have from the past, I pray that we can do better, that we can start anew, that we can have a fresh start. And I offer this prayer in our names as Blessed Central Family. Amen and Aju. Thank you.